Africa. So time now to get into and sink our teeth into safeguarding the people's voice in the legislative process. I did a search in the Constitution and it got 7 mentions. 2 are repeat mentions. So in 5 places, we had public participation mentioned in the legislative process. Twice in the county assemblies, in the National Assembly, public finance, I believe it was.
Public finance,
yeah.
Involved government, Article 10.
All right. Clearly, people have done. People know that they're in the right line of work, Diana. Let's put it that way. So, do you believe? I'll start with you, Achieng. You know how Bina was saying, "There's no peace at home, so I can't even stay at home if I was to stay at home." You remember?
Yeah.
So is it a manifestation? Are these the quote failure to listen to the people's voice where the certain provisions of the Finance Act are concerned? Could that have contributed to people going out on the streets, Achieng?
I believe so, Olive. And for me, I think it's unfortunate that at this point, we still think it is between the 2 gentlemen, President Ruto and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. I think it was about them some time back. Initially, when the demo started, there was a lot of political undertone in it. But over time, it has not got better. Government has not done anything to make it better. Actually, within that time is when the finance bill was debated. They came to the public, disregarded what the public said, and went on to tell us, again, in their lack of wisdom, that tupende tusipende, serikali ifanye nini, haishindwi. And true to what they had said, serikali haikushindwa. And the bill was enacted into law and the president signed it. So now frustration, when people go out for maandamano, it is not because Raila has said, it is because there is no peace at home, as Bina said. You know, it is because there is no food. It is because all these things now are piling up. So, school, the subsidies at school were reduced. Universities, you saw the story. You have just read about Naivasha and the 600 boards. And the kind of luxuries we see there. All that in our minds, of course, is per diem. You know, you see all the wastage, and then you're imagining they still want to take money from me. You feel so frustrated, you're so angry, but because we are good people and we have been educated about domestic violence, we do not fight at home. We go and vent and scream on the streets, and that's what you're seeing. So even if they try and stop, I believe even if people are told to stop, people are already prepared psychologically to just go out there and vent. People want to be heard. You cannot call people to a meeting to seek their opinion about a particular piece of legislation, and then you go on to do what you wanted to do. And before you did that, you forewarned us that you would do what you wanted to do anyway, you know. So I think it is just the anger and the frustration of kubebwa kimalenge, for lack of a better expression. You know, people are just out there telling them, you seem to have forgotten that the power, we donated the power to you. Even if you're going to step on us, at least allow us to push back, you know.
All right.
You cannot beat me and tell me not to cry. So now people are crying.
Okay. Duncan Hembers just sent me a message on WhatsApp. Earlier, he said I would play a clip of a gentleman, a video that was shared on TikTok and that was shared with me on WhatsApp. He is the one who shared it with me on WhatsApp. Credit due. But Mike, who is my director, Mike, I believe we have the video. Can we play it?
Finance bill, I only have question. What is the meaning and what is the purpose of public participation in any legislation? Kama tunaenda tunapitisha, tunafanya public participation na over 90% ya wale watu wote walipeleka maoni yao, walipinga vipengele fulani katika hiyo finance bill. Then serikali inatuambia tupende tusipende wataipitisha tu. Swali langu ni hili. Ilikuwa na maana gani kufanya public participation? Is it a one way just go and ask questions to people, ama their views na maoni yao ina play a role in making of the law? because kama haitatumika kwa kufanya hiyo sheria, haifai kufanya nini, haifai kufanya hiyo public participation. Na tunawaambia akina Omtata aende kotini wa demand the interpretation of public participation, ama ni kuuliza tu maswali ama ni kutumia maoni yao katika kutengeneza sheria, kwa sababu kama haitatumika haina maana. Sisi hatuna shida na finance bill na collection of taxes na whatever, lakini our views must count. You can't force anything to us. Na haiwezi kuwa tulikuwa welevu tukiwachagua alafu tutakuwachagua ikuwe hatuwezi fikiria ni nini mzuri yetu, that we must be forced to buy or to take whatever comes. The same brains tulitumia kuwachagua are the same brains tumetumia kukataa zile vipengele hatutaki kwa hiyo finance bill. Na tunaambia wabunge wetu wote wajue watasikiliza nani. Sisi ndio tuliwatuma huko na tumesema mambo kadhaa kwa hiyo finance bill kama housing and extra taxations tumeikataa. Wewe serikali tafute njia ya kudiversify the way ya kutafuta taxes kwa wale watu wenye hawalipi, si wenye wanalipa waongezewe zaidi ya ile uwezo wako nayo ya kufanya nini, ya kulipa. So my point is that the purpose of public participation must count in the making of the law.
All right, so he is wondering, can you go, he was saying, go, okay, Mtata and ETC, and then continue and interpret for us, what is this public participation? Ama ni maoni tu tunapeana, kupeana. And on a light note, the caption that accompanied the video when it was sent to my phone was, he might be missing some teeth, but clearly he's not missing common sense. I don't know. Do you agree? Diana, you're one of those who participated in this exercise. In fact, when okay, so I put this up on my status, and one of my panelists, eminent panelists, and her name is Celestine Njagi, she sent me a message. She said, the people's voice should not conflict with personal interest. Also, do we, the people, contribute when asked to? Do we bring forth our ideas? And you did. Diana, not just as yourself, but as a consortium of organizations. Do you feel heard? Do you feel like your voice counted at the end of the day?
No, it's such a tragedy what has happened this year around the budget making process. And particularly, my blame lies with Parliament. Because in the budget making process, Parliament is called a house of supply, and very, very deliberately, because at this point they must supply the nation with the economic policy that will guide us for a year as people's representative in a democracy. From the time the policy document was tabled in August, there was no house, so it was handed over to them in September. Kenyans, out of the hope and belief that we were headed for some economic transformation, engaged very, very differently and robustly. This went on through to the budget policy statement. A policy statement that was very, very well worded, with austerity measures, a different sense of borrowing, proper expenditure, and even attempts to address the address the shortfalls and the delays in disbursing money to the counties. I participated in all these processes, and I know there was an increased number of participation based on the findings that we have gotten from our partners, Mzalendo, and most recently the survey that has been done by Twaweza and the Center for Fiscal Affairs. So Kenyans brought forth their ideas, and there was a lot of pushback. For instance, we made strides when Treasury tried to bring forward division of revenue between the national government and the county government based on 4 years old audit. Yet, based on the robustness of our constitution, civil society had gone to court, and the court had pronounced itself that Parliament must use the most recent audit, and they must not be older than 48 months, 2 years. No, yeah, 24 months. 24 months.
Yeah,
sorry, 24 months. the mathematics of trillions and everything during the budget making process. Sometimes
you have numbers fatigue.
Yes, I have. Oh no, it's been crazy. So that if you look at the budget policy statement that was sent by Treasury, they quickly updated it by the time it was being discussed by Parliament. Priorities were set, expenditure was to be tightened, doctors, teachers, parents association, people voiced what must be a priority in the budget. And thereafter, it was also very clear, based on where the economy is, you can only strengthen enforcement, not increase taxation. Now, come to the finance bill. The minute the revenue raising measures were pronounced by Treasury and tabled before the Finance Committee, a record, groups, not individuals, groups, 1,400, tabled their memoranda before Parliament and before this committee. The hearings were in Mlolongo, not here in KICC or Parliament. They were in Mlolongo. There were no county-based hearing, but people made their way. From as far as Kisumu, Turkana, they made their way to the hotel where this committee was listening. The committee gave everybody time. They nodded in agreement from the housing levy, additional taxation, everything. An analysis of that memoranda, we can say that's the formal participation, was done. And within that, 70% were opposed. Move away from that because we're a democracy and public participation should not be just confined to Parliament. There was public participation on this show. They should actually gazette this show. People voiced. And I know you didn't bring just one type of panelist. Yeah. There were different people with different expertise, and views were voiced. Some people petitioned their MPs directly and told them, you cannot do this. After that, they opened a half-day session at KICC. Again, Kenyans were opposed to the taxation measures. Despite all that, our representatives decided our ego as a party, our ego and the ego of the president is more important than the views of all the Kenyan people. What we have seen in this particular legislative process of the budget is an elevation of ego over the will of the people. When that happens, how big is your ego? To counter 50 million Kenyans who support this economy. It is a committee of supply. Even if all of us were to boycott taxes, our MPs and cabinet cannot sustain this country. It is the people who are able to sustain this particular economy. So if you look at that, it is very, very worrying. And the threshold for public participation, both the Senate and the National Assembly have declined to legislate on that matter. Okay. But the courts have pronounced themselves. The indication is, based on the magnitude of the issue, the participation must be at that level, must be measured, and must be seen to be addressed in that particular process. Okay. That is not the case here. And based on the FKE statement,
yes,
I do agree, because the budget making process, not just the taxes, it is what determines whether we should be going for these concessional loans that have been reported today. Concessional loans means commercial loans that will force us in the next 3 years to raise our taxes again without any prudence.
Okay.
Should they have a higher threshold? I do agree. By all means, it is very clear that economic oppression and violation is at the heart of good governance and human rights. So, moving forward, can we get a 2/3 majority of parliamentarians. That should be the quorum in the House at the very, very minimum. If possible, we should even take it to 85%.
Okay.
That way, any member of parliament who is not there must be held to account, and probably also change the recall clause so that we can recall them within the first year.
Okay. Annabelle, I clearly can tell that this is something that, because she invested her time, she invested her Alienda all the way to Mlolongo. Clearly, that's why I allowed her to release.
Okay.
Annabelle, e-public participation in Nini, is there a law that guides it, what the nature of this public participation should be? Because even in the courts where you participate, there are many judgments we come across where, you know, the court's verdict is that there was no public participation.
Public participation, to put it simply, is just involving non-state actors in the decision-making processes of the government. It can take any manner of ways. It can be a consultation where I ask for, you know, your opinion, your advice, the way we're just conversing now. I could ask you to submit them in written form, which is the memoranda you're hearing Diana talking about. Or it could just be those, you know, barazas that used to be called back in the day. And there has been, by the time we're ending up with Article 10 and public participation featuring therein, there's a history that Kenya had with public participation from, you know, back when we had the local authority development action plans to when we had the DFRD. I believe that was the district focus for rural development. But the reason why we ended up with public participation in our constitution is the fact that those things or those institutions or those units were not working, especially the DFRDs, because DFRDs were primarily run by chiefs, DOs and DCs. So what would end up happening, depending, because you see, these are people who are working for government, and based on some of the issues, sometimes government really truly had a vested interest and needed that thing to go through. So what would happen, chiefs, DOs and DCs would get their marching orders, which would be, we need to get favorable feedback, not opposing feedback. So these guys would go kwa ground and get people who they know are aligned to what government wants. And those are the people who would be engaged in the public participation exercises. So with time, it became clear that it was not going to work because the people were not being heard. The other thing is, primarily people would be asked to attend these forums for information about decisions that had already been made in Nairobi to be communicated to them. So, uko Marsabit, uko Nyanza, you're being told decision 1, 2, 3 was made. Oblivious to perhaps the unique realities that you may be experiencing as a Kenyan in that part of the country. Oblivious to the fact that perhaps you may have had an opinion or an input in terms of, yes, you can roll that out, but in our scenario, could it perhaps be rolled out in this way as opposed to this way because this will work better for us? And that is ideally the whole point of public participation. And then beyond that, we've had petitions going to court over and over again. We've had IEBC and NASA in civil appeal back in 2017. We've had Mui Coal, I believe, versus Ministry of Energy in 2013, 2014. And you look at the decisions of the courts and the jurisprudence that they rely on, and it comes down to one thing. One, it is not a suggestion. It is not a favor. Public participation is among those things in the Constitution that was not meant to be realized progressively or in the future. Mm-hmm. It has been put in place, you roll it out like yesterday. That's how it's supposed to work. The other thing is it's supposed to bring in diversity and inclusiveness. So there were what we had minority groups. There are those marginalized areas. So if we're having a conversation about water and sanitation, which areas are greatly affected by lack of sanitation services, lack of water services. Those are the people you really truly need to have a conversation with, because they know where the shoe is pinching. If it's a question of cost of living, like Diana is talking about, all these groups, people taking memoranda to their opinion, at the end of the day, there's a tax implication. Who does this tax implication affect? It is this Kenyan who is seeking out the member of parliament to tell them, hey, listen, 1, 2, 3, I am okay with. Hii ingine, can it wait? Or can we revise it downwards? What are the options we have? Let's have a conversation and see what works best for government, because you people need to run your operations. But at the same time, what also works for me, because I also need to run my operations in my office, in my home, and wherever else that I operate from. And that is why the courts keep referring to something called the subsidiarity principle. And the subsidiarity principle says, those most affected by a policy, legislation, or action must have a bigger say in that policy, legislation, or action, and their views must be more deliberately sought and taken into account. So you're not having this conversation with them just to check a box that we've done it. You actually need to take their views into account and see how best to accommodate them. Now, the question we're having here, and it still goes back to, there was a morning I was here and we were discussing the cases. It still goes back to that. Even in the CAS situation, public participation was conducted. They got over, I think, 900 views or thereabout. About 60-65% of that were people in opposition too. It was 600 and something, and then some 300 and something were like, okay, fine, we see the logic, we're okay with it. But by the time you're having 600 out of 900 telling you, you need to go back to the drawing board. So they're saying no. It's not just a no. What exactly are they saying no to? How do we address that? If they're saying no to the number, and remember, this is when they had introduced the 23, not even the 50 who were being done away with. If the issue is the number, can we revise the 23 perhaps down to 15 or 13? You know, if it's a question, if they're saying no because it's just purely not necessary at this point in time, do we do away with all of them? And if it's a question of political awardees, we find other ways of rewarding them. We're just from talking about state corporations. Boards are not certain by 2 people. Mwongozo recommends, I believe, 7 to 9. So 7 to 9 across all these state corporations, you can at least give 3 allocations for your political awardees without having to create another position which will force us to fork out more money. Now, in terms of legislation, so we have the Constitution giving us that provision. We had Ministry of Devolution back when the Honorable Mwangi Kionjori was CS issuing a policy document, a guide to walk county governments through how to conduct the exercise of public participation. And then I believe in 2013 we had an executive order mandating the Office of the Attorney General to conduct or handle matters pertaining to the constitutional implementation. And the Office of the Attorney General constituted a committee that formulated a public participation policy. Now, if you Google that policy, now it still reads draft policy, and I believe they published the draft in 2018. Why it has, if it has been adopted as a policy, I don't know why it's still reading draft, but I suspect highly that it's still reading draft because it was never adopted. But that policy document now walks us through that history I was telling you about. Where have we come from as a country? What are our challenges? Part of it is, you know, not having uniform standards in terms of what is public participation in the Kenyan context. Part of it is funding, because there is a capital implication when it comes to conducting these exercises, and I will just detail shortly what those implications are. The other thing is agencies not being fully cognizant of what their role is in this process. Who needs to work with who? Because it cannot just be a singular agency conducting these initiatives most of the time, especially when it's coming from a government front. So we move from that, and then we have Public Participation Bill 2019. Started 2018, 2019, which is yet to be passed. And it details very beautiful principles on what informs public participation and how public participation should be conducted in Kenya. Why, and it's a bill that originated in Senate. Why that bill, pray tell, has not yet turned into law, I do not know. We perhaps need to trace who the sponsor of the bill was and ask them what happened. If they are no longer in the House, who perhaps can take up that bill and run with it? Because it's about time that we formalized it. But even without an act, even without that, public participation can still be conducted if our leaders just purely had the political goodwill to include the people that they represent in their decision-making processes. Now, when I talk about capital intensive, it's one, public participation has to be accessible. When we say accessible, it's kama ni finance bill, now an act that we were really going on and on about, and that the policy document that informs the bill that Diana was referring to, they tend to have very technical language. So accessibility means, one, as you're telling people we are having a public participation exercise at venue X on such and such a day, you also refer them to the place where they can get access to that document. Is it a website? Do they go to, say, Parliament grounds and a copy will be availed? Because it's something centered in Parliament, do they go to their local CDF office and collect a copy there? That copy they are collecting, is it a citizen-friendly version? And not just a citizen, meaning it's using language that is easy enough for them to consume. And not just a citizen-friendly version in English. If the language they predominantly speak there is Kiswahili, is there a version that is available in that Kiswahili? If it is a Somali community, is there a version available in that dialect? Which means, from the onset, when now Treasury starts this process, they need to have seen that end product and started preparing even this citizen-friendly version, so that by the time we're getting to the conversation with Parliament, or in Parliament, these documents were available to the citizens perhaps 2 months before, so they've had enough time to interact with this document. The other thing is accessibility of the venue. Is it in a central location that everybody can access to? Does it have barriers? Perhaps too many security checks that would just make a Kenyan go like, you know what, forget about it. Is it structurally friendly to PWDs, to the elderly? So many considerations need to go into accessibility. The other thing is openness. This is the reason why we have this document. This is the intended end goal. Full transparency. Don't disclose certain things and hide other things. Yeah. What else is there? Generally, so, and when you start taking these things into consideration, then you need to ask yourself, do we need to be having a physical engagement? Do we need to be telling people, let's liaise via SMS? Are there areas where perhaps people need to be transported to and from? Are there places where we will need to provide food, because God knows the distance between this place and wherever this person has come from, or perhaps even the most central location doesn't perhaps have facilities that will enable them to, get their meals and da-da-da-da-da. Not to use these things as a bribe, but to just facilitate this Kenyan, to make them as comfortable as possible, for them to not have pressure while they're there, to feel, okay, now I need to go. And because I'm hungry, the next place I'm going to get lunch is 10 kilometers away. Once I've gone, I'm not coming back. Give them ample room and opportunity to be heard. And once they have expressed themselves, go back and give us a report that truly reflects the positions of those citizens who were involved in this process. If they were saying no, do not sugarcoat. Right. Please, they were saying no. I have seen some members of Parliament appearing on this morning shows and evening shows, and that I'm hearing a recurrent statement that we brought housing levy down to 1.5% because Kenyans asked us to. Now, I don't know what Kenyans they were talking to, because the ones I've been interacting with did not want it at all. So let's be honest. Okay. Let us be honest. Don't call people to give you views, and then you come back and spit in our faces and say, actually, what they were saying, no. They were very clear on what it is they were saying. So I hear my fellow Kenyan, when he was asking what is public participation truly, do you just call me for the sake of checking a box and then you go ahead and do whatever it is you want to do? Anyway. And you can tell, even when he cannot come and make reference to a piece of case law like I have, he does, in his own way, he does understand what the role of public participation is. And that is why he is saying, you trusted me enough to choose you, as my leader. You thought then that I had the mental capacity to do so. Why do you now think that I do not have the mental capacity to give input in the decisions you're making that impact my life?
Okay.
So we do need to take Kenyans seriously, and our leaders really, truly need to check themselves. And that house, I think when Diana says she lays the blame at National Assembly, for me it goes deeper than that. We really need to ask and question the role of political parties in our national structure. I believe the day we move from political parties being centered around personalities, then we will start having an independent parliament where you're not afraid that your party leader is going to whip you because you rode on his or her name to get into that house. When you understand that your power comes from your electorate and not so much from your party leader. Yes, there's a political goodwill that you need from your party leader, but you owe more. You owe more, whether you like it or not. You owe more to Wanjiku as opposed to your party leader, because that Wanjiku atakuangalia tu. How many did you see walikuja kamoga pesa 2022 and 2017 and they were still sent packing? Wanjiku can send you packing.
Okay. All right, so I need to take a break, but Bina, I will come to you. Clearly, this is a subject on which you guys came ready. On the other side of this break, we continue with the public participation conversation, or should we call it, as Dan Mwangi referenced it in one memo, a pointless exercise.
is looking at you. He's seeing a millionaire. He's seeing a president. He's seeing a businessman.
Join us for a mega supernatural restoration crusade at the Tononoka grounds from 20th to 23rd July starting 2 p.m.
You shall immediately withdraw from your political campaign.
What?
The people are mad because we are all still supporting you.
I'll talk to my lawyers and they will prepare the papers needed for the divorce.
You can't expect me to sign those papers. I still love you.
I've had enough of your lies.
Do you know that she was the one who uploaded that video? If not for your beloved daughter.
But it's you on the video.
It doesn't make any difference either way. Of course I'm not the one in the video. Just tell her. You're the only person she'll listen to.
Anna won't listen to me.
What is wrong with you? When did you start mixing up our names?
I know that it's you and Andri. I'm not mixing up anything, Anna.
Bluebird peanut butter, made with 100% pure peanuts and a good source of omega-6. Grow healthy and happy kids with Bluebird peanut butter. Available in 200 grams, 400 grams, and 800 grams. Buy a pack today.
In my shirt, a toss of lavender and a world of freshness.
Wash your clothes with Toss Lavender to leave your clothes with a lasting, irresistible freshness.
Bluebird peanut butter, made with 100% pure peanuts and a good source of omega-6. Grow healthy and happy kids with Bluebird peanut butter. Available in 200 grams, 400 grams, and 800 grams. Buy a pack today.
Safaricom Open Day is back. Get Open Day discounts and offers up to 30% off. Safaricom is enabling you today. Ingia Digital na Open Day. This is your chance to jump on the best smartphones and accessories from your most trusted brand. Free 1 GB on us. Get any new 4G phone and enjoy Safaricom Open Day offer. Simply dial *544# to check your eligibility. Quality and reliable from Safaricom phones are Neon Ray, Samsung, Tecno, Nokia, and Itel. Promotion ends on 21st July 2023. Hurry while stocks lasts.
Baba yetu uliye mbinguni, Jina lako litukuzwe. Ufalme wako ufike. Utakalo lifanyike duniani kama mbinguni. Utupe leo mkate wetu wa kila siku. Utusamehe makosa yetu kama nasi tunavyowasamehe waliotukosea. Usitutie katika majaribu, bali utuokoe na yule muovu. Kwa kuwa ufalme ni wako, na nguvu na utukufu milele daima. Amina.
To get Baba Yetu as your Skiza tune, dial star 811 star 925 hash.
Skiza na Nation.
To AM Live, we're having a discussion on public participation, au kufanyishwa PE, which Dan Mange, as I mentioned just before the break, described as pointless exercise. Bina, you were sharing your experience with public participation.
Yes. So first of all, I want to say that I love what my colleagues have said, but personally, I always find it very interesting the way, citizens give their views, and then the government goes back to say, I think what the citizens mean, they want to interpret your own views, literally. And you've shown up, you've either done the memos. I mean, we're on TV half the time, we're in the community half the time giving our views, but then interpreting. And for me, it begs the question of who does the government listen to? That's something I've been asking myself, who does the government listen to? Because if you're not listening to the citizens, right, are you then listening to your legal officers or your legal team? Are you listening to the Attorney General? Because it's supposed to give you legal counsel, right? So what is the Attorney General's office saying? And if they're saying something about what is happening, are you listening? So is it a problem that you're not listening to the citizens? Or is it the quality of advice you're also receiving on the other end? Or is it people around you just rubber stamping what you're saying? Because we are sharing our views, right? We are telling you how we feel about every other thing, what we think about every other thing. And, and for me, and just to reiterate, Chapter 1 of the Constitution is very clear. And it says, all sovereign power belongs to the people, right? And to the people of Kenya, and shall be exercised only in accordance with this constitution. The people may exercise their sovereign power either directly or indirectly through their democratically elected representatives, right? So, and for me, and just to also reinforce what my colleague was talking about here, when you hear even your elected leaders talk about allegiance, to their political parties, and they did not get 5 votes, it's not their political parties that elected them. It might have contributed to them being elected, but majorly, we elected you at the community level. That's why we elected you, And you belonging to this political party does not guarantee that in the next election you're actually going to be elected. So the fact that even for our own elected leaders who understand the dire situations in their community, I'm telling you, there are very areas in this country, very, very poor constituencies. You understand the dire situation in your community. Every other weekend when you're going home. In fact, there are so many elected leaders who avoid going back to the community even over the weekends because they know how the situation is, because they know people are starving, because they know the healthcare situation at the community. Yet the same people will tell you, I can't go against my party, right? So is it about the party or is it about the people? So when it comes to the quality of participation now, I have attended, a few public participation for us at the community level. And we're just sharing here during the break how at one time, we mobilized our Chama women to attend the public participation. I think it was on an April. We're discussing, one of the processes within the budget cycle. And I remember when we got there, they said, we have enough people already. And the enough people were about less than 100, So I said, there are more people. They're like, no. How to cut me wapangia? We're not budgeted for them. I'm like, budgeted for them in terms of what, They're like, even the snacks we bought, literally at the gate, they're like, no, just select a few of them to come in. I'm like, we're over 50. How am I selecting 20 people of the Chama women I've come with here to attend the process? I mean, should you actually be happy that you have more people actually joining this process? Why are we micromanaging this process? Whatever you're going to discuss, is going to affect
all of us.
All
they
of
won't
us,
select
right?
a few of you.
Now, yeah, I'm like, okay, do you want to go outside and select for yourself? So we just bulldozed ourselves, you know, and we entered the space. But it tells you how even the session went on, because there's a way, even sometimes they're even denying you the, you know, the microphone, you know, because they're just like, you know, you're trying to show that you're combative and all. And for me, that was a very sad state of affair when we, you know, when we did experience that. But that said, even when I was watching the quality of participation, it goes back to if even the members and the citizens who are participating there don't even have access to these documents prior to be able to analyze them, how then are they giving quality feedback when they come into the room? Because then now you'll just be reading to them about, oh, this is what is happening, what do you think? And there's no time to process the information that you're actually being given while you're in the room. Because when I was studying the mood in the room and the feedback and the review, majority of the citizens, except actually the ones who are leading the process, had not accessed the documents. So at the end of the day, it was more of, okay, you know, and then even the way they frame the conversations, you know, it's an either yes or no, what do you think? But I mean, you're discussing big budgets, more than more than what I make. You know, you're discussing big budgets. I'm probably jobless. So even the numbers you're telling me don't even make sense. The plans, the plans you even have for, for this constituency or for the county, I am not even aware of them. For me to figure out where are you at with these other plans, for me to actually agree to this particular priority. You know, have we been able to achieve priority A, B, and C, you know? So there is that. And then over and above, feedback. We never get feedback, even when you go to the public participation forums. So what are the mechanisms that we've put in place to ensure that even the citizens who participate in those public participation forums actually get feedback? Because you'd like to know whether your opinion was factored in or it was not factored in. And if it was not, perhaps reason. So we don't even have those mechanisms put in place to ensure that you have feedback when you go to public participation. And then with the advent of COVID, you know, we saw how COVID-19 moved most aspects of our lives, to the digital space, you know, for us to be able to work, study, and even make our voices heard. Why aren't we adopting that also when it comes to public participation? You know, this is a digital government as well. And we've seen how most services have moved to the digital space. Why is it that unless Olive is at the community, her opinion won't count? You know, how are we ensuring that the bulk of the citizens who are in their offices sometimes and would like to travel all the way to a country, to their constituency, to participate in public participation, what are the mechanisms you're putting in place to ensure that even their views count? Because you meet majority of people, and sometimes we can bash people, right? In terms of, why don't you show up for public participation? So if something is happening today, we're already here, right? Is there room for us to still give our view? How do we cater to the different demographics of our society that might not be present at the venue, but they have an opinion to give? Yet there's so many services, even at the county government level, that have actually gone digital. So the fact that we're not even very keen to see how we can use tech to enhance public participation is a worrying situation, because we also miss out on diversity. So there's still work to be done to look at these gaps, to strengthen these gaps, and just at the bare minimum understand that public participation is just to ensure that we don't have wastage when it comes to public investments.
All right. They'll argue that they provide...
Olive, if I may.
Yes, Acheng, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
You're
go ahead.
looking for me in space.
No, I was coming to you next. Go ahead.
Now, as my colleagues were speaking, I was just thinking about Makueni, the Makueni story.
Yes.
And Makueni is the ideal, you know, in Professor Kibwana's first term. Remember, he had an issue with his assembly.
Yes.
And he never made public participation into law. Yet they had the best example. And what Professor Kibwana did, which Homa Bay County has borrowed now, is that he did not have people come from the headquarters to go to the people. You know, because the county is organized into villages and then it comes up. Typical bottom up. And if there was a government that would get it right, it is this one whose mantra is bottom up empowerment, you know, because the people at the ground know what their problems are. You can't know everything. West Pokot, there's a time I did some work in West Pokot and they had an issue with cattle dip. And it kept getting funding year in, year out. Yet the issue was there was no supply of water into the cattle dip. You know, the structure for the dip was there, but there was no supply. How would you know if you sit in Kapenguria? You would have to talk to the people in Sigor, for the people in Sigor to tell you that particular cattle dip, maji imeisha pale, weka pipe, connect pipe, you know. So Professor Kibwana did that. And people would sit in the village, and from the village, they would agree on these are our priorities. So he'd give, this is the amount of money we'll spend in this area. These are our priorities. This is what ails us. And then they would select representatives to go to a higher level. And it would go like that until they get to the ward level. And the ward level now has an idea of what the issues are from all the different villages. Now, I was just thinking to myself, if a county can find a national government could find a way to work with county government, or MP Mutuse Mwengi the other day had a motion in parliament about having village elders paid. Village elders, what do they, who's they're following, what area do they represent? It is villages. So already if a national government, if they wanted to access people, citizenry at the village level, they have structures to the village level. They don't have to come down. Why can't they be fed, you know, bottom up? Why can't they pick information from the bottom and it is fed upwards? People will say it in Kikamba, people will say it in Zoluo, people will say it in Turkana, and then they'll come and put it in English nicely when it gets to the national level. But people from all levels, people from all corners of the country will have given their input, will have spoken, because I think it gets expensive when they want to bring it to a central place and people have to make their way there. If they bring it to where you are, I used to see Professor Kibwana would go and they'd sit under a tree on stones and women would come with their lassos. And people would say that whatever they want the government to do for them. We want you to spend money on this year. Last year, you spent money on finishing our classes here. This year, we would want you to spend money on building for us dispensaries. People walk to those venues because it is at the village level. But if you want it done by people at the national level, you want the people to come to, the Nairobi people to go to the villages. How many villages are there? One county, I was seeing Makueni has about 3,000 and something. Homa Bay has way more than that until we had to collapse them into village clusters for it to be possible to work with them. But even at village cluster level, if you call people to a meeting, nobody needs to take a motorbike. People just walk to that meeting and they know each other. And if you say you want water, they'll say, but your area, you only walk 200 meters to a water point. Why don't you allow us to put water in another corner? They know the area. So by the time information gets to the central point where decisions are made, it is what the people want. It is, you cannot argue with it. Nobody will say they need water if they indeed, they actually need a school or a hospital. So I think how we look at it also makes it expensive. If we could change how we look at it and borrow this bottom-up mantra, which the Kenya Kwanza government is running with, it will probably make it cheaper. The challenge, I know, however, is the people get cuts from government projects. Now, if you leave it to the public to decide what is important, as we will decide we want water, we want hospitals, we want schools increased, but is there money in that? Money is in major infrastructure things, you know, and that is why they decide we don't have brains after they get into power, because the things we want done for us are not lucrative for government or for people who get into government. Because if you were to come to us I remember Uhuru had something about merging parastatals. If they were to come to us with such a conversation, you think they would have had a meeting with 600 of them in Naivasha? They never would have, because we would have refused. You know, we would citizens would have refused. And that's the reason you'll hear stories like, oh, citizens don't come when you invite because you have sent a chief who people don't like and is the one who's coordinating the meeting. So people don't come because people know what the chief does from history and has been shared here by my colleagues before. The chief from history will just come and tell you what the government wants to, they'll come and listen to you, and then they will go ahead and do that which they wanted to do, but at least they have a list of people who participated, and minutes. What are minutes? Things that I can sit and type and say this is what we agreed on. So there's a lot of also mistrust, but that has changed over time. And the cure for it worked well in Makueni, even before it was low. I know now it is low there, and I can see it's working well. I think Elgeyo Marakwet also have a very good model of public participation, and it's working beautifully in Homa Bay County. So why can't national government borrow these lessons? They can either use the models where it's working, borrow the models it's working, the counties it's working in, or use their own structures where they want, and then they're able to justify what they even want to pay the village elders. You know, they will have at least done some work, some meaningful work, which we can see. You don't have to spend money on these things, Olive. You don't have to.
All right.
But you know, Olive,
yes,
Bina. I think when it comes to even where it is working, you want to know that your views will be valued, you know. So even beyond the messenger who's going to be sent to mobilize you, you want to know, even beyond the mobilization, will your views be, you know, like be valued? Because, I mean, people traveled all the way to Mlolongo, right? Like, that is braving the traffic, fuel, everything, because of this perception that, you know what, actually, while I'm tabling this memo, they may actually consider my, you know, my views, you know, all the people who gathered in Mlolongo, and then only for your views to be trashed and all that. So people want to actually know, will my views be valid for them to show up and participate qualitatively?
All right, so I want us to make our closing remarks, and then Annabelle, I'll have you go first because I need to release you. Your last word on this subject, and I will look at the Makueni situation once we're done with that.
Actually, it's interesting that Cheng brings up the Makueni situation, because I remember there's a time I was having a conversation with Madam Florence Machio. Actually, Bina was there, and she was giving us the example of the Makueni situation and what triggered Governor Kivuda then to take the mode that he did. He realized they were scheduling public participation sessions and turnout was low, and he's wondering how he's supposed to get views if we're only having 2 people showing up. So he went on a fact-finding mission to establish why exactly are people, especially women, not showing up for my public participation forums. And he found that, like, the women are telling him, listen, when we wake up every morning, we have certain duties that we have to perform before we can decide to venture out of our compounds to go and pursue other things, whether it's a chama meeting or whether tunaenda kuomboleza na fulani. Certain things need to get done. So if you want us to show up for these things and actually give you input, it would be preferable if we can have them from 2 p.m. onwards, and then preferably bring them closer to us. So that's how it ended up working. It started with him asking, what works for you? So one, I would say our leaders need to understand that public participation is not a suggestion, it is not an option, it is something they actually have to comply with, it is something they have to fulfill. Number 2, once you explain to the citizen what's in it for them, and you start that from the point where you're publicizing that we're going to have a public participation exercise for 1, 2, 3, at that stage, if you explain to them what's in it for them, they're very likely to show up for that activity without asking for handouts, without, you know, feeling entitled to, I don't know, whatever form of treatment, because they know it's for them. And then beyond that, when you actually take into consideration what it is they have said and they see it in your implementation, then they know they are valued. So when you call them the next time and the time after that, they're going to show up, and chances are your numbers are going to be growing, because the ones who attended the first one are going to be telling the others, by the way, you guys, that thing you're seeing, we actually gave them views that last time when they came. So it's, I understand that sometimes, you know, like Acheng was saying, there's personal interests even in these public activities. So I understand that sometimes as a politician, you may want to look out for yourself. And it is important. It is part of the survival. No, Oliver, I won't lie to you. It is part of the survival. Politics is brutal. But you also need to weigh the pros and cons. Handled right, handled tactfully, public participation could end up being more beneficial to your career as an elected representative, as opposed to more disadvantageous. Okay. And again, I still go back to that mzee. You cannot value me when you need my vote. And then beyond that, when you're making decisions that affect my life and my children's lives, you do not show up. But additionally, I think also now this is a challenge that we take to the doorstep not only of our elected representatives, but civil society as a whole. We need to devise mechanisms of really truly sensitizing the masses on the role and importance of public participation, and do so like we would to a 2-year-old. Okay. I keep saying that every time when we're engaging citizens on these technical issues, we have to find a way of communicating it to them using analogies that they use in everyday language, hearing them out and seeing what angle they want to approach issues from, because you'd be surprised. You'd be very, very surprised at the insights and thoughts that Kenyans have in their minds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of civil society, Diana, in a minute each, Bina, Diana, Achieng, because I'm eating into the next show. Diana?
I think in my closing remarks, I would say we have seen a lot of pressure being piled on county governments that control only 15% of the national resources so far, because we are stuck in the imperial presidency, and so we have a problem with other people having some level of power and resources. Public participation is something beautiful. Getting to know what the people want out of any planning or legislative process is something that should be embraced. In a democratic system of government like Kenya, it is an obligation of government. Having said that, it is truly problematic that we still do not have legislation to effect that particular obligation.
Okay.
The Attorney General office has failed us because it's a constitutional obligation. They ought to table a public participation law as the first order of business to even quell this particular problem.
Right.
Parliament cannot keep evading this particular process, and it is time that we ensured participation anchors democracy, not mocks. It does not become a mockery of the Kenyan people.
All right. Bina?
Just again, from my community perspective, I think it is sad that most of the time we look at people at the community and citizens as beneficiaries and not as stakeholders who can have quality views when it comes to local development that affects them. Because public participation, again, is supposed to avoid wastage when it comes to public investments. And I'm hoping that our leaders are going to look at the citizens as stakeholders and accommodate their diversity to ensure that the decisions they are making actually suit all of us and not just serving a few interests in leadership or in politics.
All right. Your last word, Achieng?
Yeah, I think for me, I'd say it's important that the leadership that be understands that if we were a developed country, we'd probably have gone the Switzerland way, where we have referenda on everything and make decisions about everything. But because we do not have the capacity, we then said we want people to be heard through public participation. Yes, we elect you to go and represent us on other matters, and but before a decision is made, come back to us. Let us tell you what we want done and how we want it done.
Okay.
So as long as that remains in the minds of those we have elected into power, then we have no problem. But as long as they continue to imagine that we delegated all power and responsibility to them and that they can do things the way they want, then we have a problem, because we also know that National Assembly is in Nairobi, Senate is in Nairobi. So they are away from our reality on the ground. So it is important that they listen to us for them to remain alive to the issues that affect the rest of us outside of Nairobi.
All right, thank you so very much. Now, so a lot of what was referenced by the three of you this morning is available online. There was what Diana talked about, and that is Twaweza and Center for Fiscal Affairs. There was an article penned by, who is this? Okay, I cannot find it at this moment, but essentially it was published in the Business Day. Oh, Peter Mburu. 90% of Kenyans reject Finance Bill 2023. You've had the numbers bandied about, but perhaps you don't know the source. The source is the survey that was conducted by civil society groups Twaweza and Center for Fiscal Affairs. There's TIFA also did a poll that showed that the 16% VAT on petroleum products was unpopular. The Housing Fund followed suit. Then there was what you talked about, the bill. This is the National Assembly Bill of 2019 on public participation. We need to check on what happened. Where is it? Then there was something you mentioned from the State Law Office with regard to a draft policy on public participation. Okay, it is telling me this connection is not private, but Eco online, you will be able to find it online. So let me thank my panelists. And Makueni, you can also find that on the Makueni County Government website. Yes, here. Oh, no. Here we go. And this is the public participation framework published on the Makueni County website, which delineates the forum, Village People's Forum, the number of forums, the number and source of participants, how the forum is composed and working, the development committee, representatives, etc. Available. All this material available online. I want to thank my panelists this morning, Achieng Osogo, who's joined us virtually, governance and political analyst, Bina Maseno, executive director, Vadili Africa, Annabelle Njoki, advocate, as well as Diana Gishenko, national coordinator. Tisa, I will be back in a few minutes with Your World.